children lost, ensnared by a witch's binding spell. Jessiie, the awakened soul, yearns to escape and find a new home. Dare you join her and explore more?
Let's get into these very creepy Titanic facts. The Titanic was a luxury British steamship built to be virtually unsinkable, but it sank in the early hours of April 15th of 1912 after striking an iceberg, leading to the deaths of more than 1,500 passengers and crew. Titanic has inspired countless books, articles, and films, including the 1997 Titanic movie starring Kate Winslet and Leonardo DiCaprio. So here are some things that you may not have known about this tragedy. The first creepy thing is that an American author actually predicted the sinking of the Titanic before it happened. In 1898, American author Morgan Robertson wrote a book called The Wreck of the Titan, which was about an enormous ocean liner called the Titan, which hits an iceberg in the North Atlantic and sinks. Now, there were so many similarities about this book that was written in the 1800s with the sinking of the Titanic years later. First, the two ship names were only 2 letters apart, Titan versus Titanic. They were also said to be almost the same size. They both sank in April. They both hit an iceberg which caused them to sink. So literally, the book that he wrote was exactly what happened to the Titanic, which just freaked people out all over the world. After this event happened, people started calling this author a psychic, but he constantly denied that he was. The next fact is that 8 people died during the ship's construction. People say that the Titanic was plagued by tragedy from the start because 8 men died during the construction of the ship, but only 5 of the names are known: Samuel Scott, John Kelly, William Clark, James Dobin, and Robert Murphy. And a plaque memorializing the 8 men in Belfast was unveiled in 2012. So like I said, right from the start, things were just doomed. The next fact is that the richest man in the world died on the ship. John Jacob Astor was not just the richest man on the Titanic, but widely believed to be the richest man in the world at the time of his death. It says he was worth an estimated 150 million, and in today's dollars, that's $3.5 billion. Astor was on the ship returning home from a months-long honeymoon with his new wife, named Madeline Talmadge, and his wife was only 18 years old, so they had a 28-year age gap. So their extended honeymoon was actually a way to escape society's gossip about the age gap, and Astor had just been divorced within only 2 years of his marriage, and apparently that was sort of unheard of back then. Astor's body was one of the few that was recovered in the Atlantic Ocean after the ship went down, and he was found with almost $3,000 still sitting in his pocket, which is roughly $60,000 in today's currency. The next really eerie fact is that a woman who actually survived the sinking of the Titanic later survived the sinking of another ship that she went on. So 2 ships in just a short amount of time that she had been on sunk, and she survived both of them. Depending on how you look at it, Nurse Violet Jessop is the luckiest or unluckiest woman alive. She survived the sinking of both the Titanic and the Britannic. Now, she was only 25 when she survived the sinking of the Titanic. She was instructed to get into a lifeboat while the ship was going down to show women that lifeboats were safe. And then, undeterred by this tragedy, Jessop began working on the Britannica until it came across a mine that had been planted by a German U-boat in 1916. So that ship also sank, Jessup escaped, but this time she had a very serious head injury that would impact the rest of her life. The next thing I want to talk about is called the Titanic orphans. The Navratil brothers were known as the Titanic orphans. They were the only two children from the ship to be rescued without a parent or guardian. Their names were Edmund and Michael, and they were only 2 and 4 years old when the Titanic sank. They were apparently with their father, who had kidnapped them onto the boat. He was trying to take them to America to get away from their mother. Apparently he and the mother were separated, and he wanted to start this new life in the new world. When the Titanic was sinking, their father put them on a lifeboat and he was never seen again. The two children spoke no English, so they were taken in by a French-speaking survivor until the authorities could locate their mother. She was able to find them about a month after the disaster, thanks to their faces being basically plastered on newspapers all over the world. Next, we have a story about a woman who refused to leave her dog behind. Anne Elizabeth Isham reportedly jumped out of a lifeboat once she realized that she couldn't take her Great Dane with her. It's been speculated that she was found in the water with her arms wrapped around her large dog, although that story is impossible to know for sure, but it's extremely heartbreaking. I feel like I would not be able to leave my dogs behind. Next, we have a story about the unknown child. A child's body was recovered from the water 5 days after the Titanic went down. Rescuers were so moved by the little boy that they buried him in a grave in Nova Scotia, memorializing the 1,000 or so children that passed away. Now, this body was actually misidentified 3 different times before he was finally identified as Sidney Goodman, because his shoes were actually donated to a museum and were DNA tested. Goodwin's tomb, marked with a headstone that says unknown child, has remained untouched. And this is actually what his family said. They said the tombstone of the unknown child represents all of the children who perished on the Titanic, and we left it that way. So this family was so sweet. Instead of changing it to their child's name after they found out it was him, they just left it to represent all of the children who passed away. Next, we have the graveyard of shoes. In 2004, a photograph was taken of a pair of shoes lying on the ocean floor at the wreckage site. The shoes were so close together that they probably were once on a victim, and the body has since disintegrated. Now, many people have been to the wreckage site of the Titanic, and no human remains have ever been found, and they will not be found because bones will dissolve relatively quickly at this depth. The only thing left of the passengers who did not survive are the clothes they were wearing and their belongings, mainly their shoes. Next, we have the story of the frozen pocket watch. There were at least 13 couples celebrating their honeymoon on the Titanic, and one of those 13 couples that were on the ship was 37-year-old Mr. John Chapman and his new bride Lizzie, who was 29. And they were actually on their way to start a new life in the US after their honeymoon. When the lifeboats were being loaded, Lizzie was placed in a lifeboat, but then heard that her husband was not allowed in the boat with her. So she apparently stated, "I won't go either," and exited the lifeboat to stand beside her husband. The couple both drowned a short time after, and Mr. Chapman's pocket watch stopped right at the moment they fell into the cold Atlantic at 1:45 a.m. The watch was recovered along with John's body, but unfortunately Lizzie's body was never found. So this is a very sad love story, and it reminds me of the movie actually. Alright guys, those are all of the very eerie and sad Titanic facts that I was able to find. If I missed anything, definitely comment it down below. If you want me to do a part 2, I might be able to look into it a bit more. Alright, let's get right into this video with more eerie Titanic facts. The first thing I want to mention is that when the Titanic first sunk, newspapers mistakenly reported that there were no casualties. In the race to publish a headline about the disaster, numerous newspapers gave families and loved ones false hope about the sinking of the Titanic. It says the World newspaper reported no fatalities, the Daily Mail declared no lives lost, and the Belfast Telegraph claimed no danger of loss of life. American newspapers were able to take advantage of the time difference, and their headlines were more accurate. But could you imagine having family or friends on the Titanic and seeing the newspaper saying, "Oh, everyone's fine, everyone's saved," and then later finding out that many people died? I mean, that's horrible. Next, I wanted to talk about the music on the boat. The famous story of the musicians playing as the ship went down is one that grabs the heartstrings. The leader of the 8 musicians, his name was Wallace Hartley, played a violin trying to keep the passengers to stay calm as the ship sank. Now, in the ship's very final moments, they played the song Near My God to Thee, and Hartley went down with the ship that night. His body was recovered 2 weeks later with his violin strapped to him. Now, the violin was an engagement gift for Hartley from his fiancée, and literally engraved on his violin were the words, "For Wallace on the occasion of our engagement, from Maria." Now, this violin was found in an attic in 2006, and it was in a case marked WHH. The violin was then returned to his grieving fiancé, who never ever married again. So it's actually a really tragic love story as well. Next, we have a story of a hat. According to those who explored the wreckage, one of the eeriest aspects is seeing objects that would have definitely been touched by human hands and have stayed in the same place that their owner left them. First class passenger Henry Harper left his bowler hat in his closet next to his coats the night the Titanic sank. What's really eerie about the whole thing is that his hat never left that closet even when the boat sank. It sat surrounded by the ruins of Harper's cabin exactly where he left it. The next thing is that a key could have potentially saved the Titanic. In 2007, 95 years after the sinking, an ordinary key was put up for auction. This key was thought to open the crow's nest locker, which had contained binoculars, equipment which could have potentially saved the Titanic from disaster. Now, obviously binoculars were vital in detecting threats back in the day, especially on boats, and the owner of the key, Second Officer David Blair, was removed from the crew right before the Titanic set sail, and due to the haste of the change, he forgot to hand the key to his replacement. So the people who were in the crow's nest, which is a part of the boat where you look out, they did not have those binoculars, so they had to rely on their eyesight to detect any threats, and people think that's one of the reasons why they did not see the iceberg on time. So if they had had those binoculars like they were supposed to, maybe things would have been different. Unfortunately, the key may never be able to unlock the full mystery of the binoculars and the Titanic. So basically, no one really knows what would have happened if they did have that key to get the binoculars. The next fact is that they made a Titanic movie 29 days after the Titanic sank. This was a black and white movie. Dorothy Gibson, a popular actress at the time, acted in a movie about the sinking of the Titanic less than a month after the ocean liner sank. Now, the craziest thing is that this actor, Dorothy Gibson, she was actually a passenger on the Titanic and experienced the sinking firsthand. They wanted to call this movie Saved from the Titanic, and at first she did not want to appear in this movie because of her PTSD. I mean, she was still traumatized by the event. However, her producers hounded her to do the movie, convinced her that it would do really well due to its captivating story. Now, they completed this whole movie within a week, and she had multiple breakdowns while she was filming. Obviously, she was experiencing things that she had already gone through. She kept bursting into tears while they were filming. It was just horrible. Once the film was released, it was not received well. Many critics were appalled that a studio would make a movie about one of the worst maritime tragedies in history 1 month after it happened. People also found out that the main actress was actually on the ship, and they felt horrible for her. I mean, the whole thing was terrible. Who makes a movie about a tragedy right after it happens? The next fact is that the iceberg may have been photographed. An ocean liner called the SMS Prince Adalbert had set sail on April 15th, 1912. During the day, someone that was on the boat spotted this iceberg that they were passing, and it had this huge red streak on it, which was very strange. It almost looked like a ship's hull had scraped against it. So they took a photograph of it, and at the time, the sinking of the Titanic was still unknown to this crew of the Prince Adalbert. So the steward actually wrote a note on this photograph. It said, "On the day after the sinking of the Titanic, the steamer Prince Adalbert passed the iceberg shown in this photograph. The Titanic disaster was not yet known by us. On one side, red paint was plainly visible, which has the appearance of having been made by the scraping of a vessel on the iceberg." So this is probably the iceberg that hit the Titanic, which is crazy to actually have a photograph of it. Next, there was a canceled emergency drill. On April 14th, the day the Titanic struck the iceberg, an emergency lifeboat drill had ironically been scheduled. scheduled, but due to unknown reasons, the drill was cancelled by Captain Smith. Now, people think that if this drill had actually gone through, many more lives could have been saved because the passengers would have more likely have followed the guidelines and the rules instead of like rushing everything. They may have followed proper protocol to get everybody off of the boat. But the thing is, people said there wasn't enough lifeboats to begin with, so I mean, who knows? Then I just wrote down some really quick other facts about the day. It says that men dressed up as women to get onto the lifeboats. Scientists also think that the entire wreck of the Titanic will be completely gone by 2030. They think there will be nothing left. This is just because of the bacteria that's eating away at it. Then there's what's called the Just Missed It Club. Days after the ship went down, newspapers began compiling lists of people who had bought tickets but never boarded the Titanic. They called them the Just Missed It Club. Then you guys know Hershey's chocolates. The owner of the famous chocolate company, Milton Hershey, was supposed to be on the Titanic, but he sold his ticket at the last minute. So who knows, he may have went down with the ship if he had gone on there. So yeah, those are more creepy, disturbing, sad Titanic facts. If you guys want me to make a part 3, give this video a thumbs up and let me know. I probably have enough facts to do one more video, but honestly, it's very tragic and it's a very horrible part of our history. But I hope you guys found this video interesting. Alright, so let's jump right into today's video talking about this museum. The Titanic Museum attraction is a museum located in Branson, Missouri. It is a sight to behold, an exact replica of the exterior of the ship, half the size. It was created so that people could experience what it was like to walk the hallways, parlors, cabins, and grand staircase of the Titanic, while surrounded by more than 400 artifacts directly from the ship and its passengers. Now, this collection alone is worth over $4.5 million, which is insane. And each guest entering the ship will receive a boarding pass of an actual Titanic passenger or crew. Then at the very end of your tour of the museum, you discover your passenger or crew's fate. In the Titanic Memorial Room, where 2,208 names line this historic wall. And for a lot of people, this is a very emotional experience. Now, the employees that work there believe that the spirits of the 1,496 people who lost their lives aboard the RMS Titanic on April 15th, 1912, have found their way to the museum dedicated to their memory. Their spirits just linger there where all of the artifacts are. It's like they're really trying to make themselves known. There was even an episode of Ghost Adventures that took place there during season 15, and they caught a crazy amount of paranormal activity. They kept catching figures standing in different rooms. They even heard this little child's voice say peekaboo. So I'm gonna start talking about the exhibits inside of this museum because there are a lot of them that are said to be haunted. There's a basin filled with water set to the exact temperature that people in the surrounding waters of the Titanic would have had to swim in after the ship sank. The ocean temperature was about 30 degrees Fahrenheit, meaning anyone who was floating in the water with a life vest would last approximately less than 15 minutes before they succumbed to hypothermia. So you're able to go here and stick your hand into this freezing ice cold water to see how long you can last. And it's really, really cold. Most people dip their hand in and say wow, and then dip it right back out. Then one of the most stunning pieces in the museum is the replica of the grand staircase. Now this cost over $1 million to make, obviously. I mean, you could look at it, it looks amazing. There was a tour guide that worked there named Jerry Terrell that says she saw the apparition of John Jacob Astor, who was a businessman and one of the wealthiest passengers on board. Now, this man did not survive the sinking of the Titanic, and many people who have visited this museum has seen him standing on the top of the staircase. There's also a beautiful replica of the glass roof that was positioned directly above the grand staircase. They even have replicas of the bunks so you can see what the third class living conditions would have looked like. Now, there was one employee who reported this incident where one of the pillows on the bed had this indent of someone's head, as if someone was actually lying there in that moment, someone they couldn't see. You can also see the first class lodgings, which were much more spacious. There's also a wedding ring that that belonged to a passenger named Carl Asplund. It was retrieved when his body was discovered after the accident. People say that his spirit still lingers here around his ring. There's a lot of energy attached to it. It's like he's hanging out just trying to get it back. There's also a room dedicated to the musicians who perished that night. The night of the disaster, they kept playing while trying to keep passengers as calm as possible in the face of almost certain death. And in the Ghost Adventures episode, they actually felt a lot of energy around this piano, and there was this light anomaly that was captured going right across the keys, which is pretty creepy. It was like someone was sitting there playing the piano. There's also an interactive exhibit where you can try your hand at experiencing what it was like being on the deck of the Titanic as it began to sink. So people will like literally climb on each one and see if they would be able to like stay on it, which you can't. I mean, the angle is literally insane. Zach from Ghost Adventures interviewed an employee named Alex Shetley, who has had her fair share of unexplainable experiences, including the discovery of mysterious child-sized handprints on the glass windows of the captain's bridge. And I think that's the most significant thing at this museum. People constantly see these little child handprints all over the place, on glass, on walls. Why are they there? I mean, it seems like spirits of the children who passed away during the Titanic are still there. There's a few more things you can do there. It says you can also touch an iceberg, shovel coal in the Titanic's boiler room, learn how to send an SOS distress signal, sit in an actual sized lifeboat and hear true passenger stories. I mean, people who have been to this museum rave about it. They say it's an amazing experience. If I'm ever in Missouri, I will definitely go there. But yeah, I had no idea until you guys told me. I had no idea this place was haunted. So it is super, super sad, but it's also amazing that they were able to keep so many of these artifacts. And the fact that they recreated the staircase in the Titanic, amazing. I wish I could go there. And then the second story is about the Mary Celeste ghost ship. Now, I have mentioned this briefly on my channel before, but I've never gone in depth about it. The Mary Celeste departed New York City on November 5th of 1872, and the ship was headed for Italy and had 10 people on board. So there was Captain Benjamin Briggs, his wife, his daughter, and his 7 crew members. What's strange is that a month later, their boat was spotted drifting near Portugal. People were really alarmed to see this, so they went on board and found that the ship was completely empty. It was just sailing along on its own with no crew, no captain, no daughter, no wife. And usually when people abandon their ship, it's because there was a problem, because it was sinking, because they were attacked. But when they found the ship, it was in almost perfect condition. And they looked at the captain's logs and there was no issues written on there either. So where had everyone gone and why? Now, the Briggs family and the crew have never to this day been found. And an interesting clue is that the lifeboat was actually missing. But like I said, they don't know what spooked them enough to do that, especially in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. And Captain Briggs and his wife actually had a son who lived in New York. So if for some reason they survived and made it to shore, they definitely would have informed him. Many theories of what transpired have been proposed over the years, ranging from sea monsters to pirates. But after more investigations, it really didn't seem like any foul play was involved. One of the most popular theories was that the ship may have encountered a waterspout, because while the ship wasn't sinking, there was a low level of water on board. Some waterspouts are essentially terrifying tornadoes on water, and encountering a waterspout could have caused the water on board the ship. And due to a malfunctioning pump, Captain Briggs could have thought the ship was taking on water much faster than it actually was, and maybe everyone just wanted to get off the ship before they thought it was gonna sink. Even this theory has some holes in it, and to this day, no one can be sure what happened to those 10 people on board the ship. But people who knew this captain knew him to be very brave. He wasn't afraid of anything. So for him to be spooked enough to get off his ship, it must have been really, really bad. Alright guys, so let's get right into talking about the Michigan Triangle. The planet we live in is often referred to as the blue planet, as more than 70% of it is covered by water. It is believed that the water makes it possible for Earth to harbor life. On the other hand, some unusual things about the oceans and lakes confirm that they still have secrets waiting to be explored. The Michigan Triangle is one such example of mysteries hidden beneath the water. Although it's not as famous as the Bermuda Triangle, a number of unusual events are equally inexplicable. People consider it a hotspot for UFO sightings. People think it might be a gateway to a parallel universe. strange things have just occurred there. People have gone missing, people have seen strange things. The mysterious Michigan Triangle is a part of the Great Lakes in North America, and the area resembles an acute angle triangle. It covers Lake Michigan, which is the largest freshwater lake in the United States. So I want to talk about the first ever abnormal incident in this triangle. And this occurred in 1679, so it started quite a long time ago. This was during a time when the world was exploring new ways and routes for expanding trade. Now, there was this boat back then called Lake Griffin, which at the time was one of the largest sailing vessels that they had. They went on a voyage in 1679 to find a northwest passage to China and Japan. Now, all was going completely well until they went to pass through the Michigan Triangle. As soon as they got within those boundaries, the ship disappeared. The ship never returned. No parts of the ship were ever found. They never found any remnants of the crew. It was literally like it just evaporated into thin air. There was also another boat disappearance in 1891, a boat called the Thomas Hume, and nothing was ever found of that boat either. Even until this day in 2021, all the divers that have been there, all the research that they've done there, they've never found parts of those boats or the skeletons of those humans. The next strange story is called the cloudless sky. Who could have thought a clear and cloudless sky would cause harm to a ship? In 1883, the crew of a wooden tugboat called Mary McLean had a very strange story to tell. They claimed to have witnessed huge blocks of ice falling from the sky while they were sailing on the lake. They said that for a whole 30 minutes, it was basically pouring down giant blocks of ice, huge blocks, with no clouds in the sky, no storm. The sky was blue. The crew managed to save a large chunk of ice in its galley icebox and recounted the horrific ordeal when they got back to the harbor. And of course, everyone was just in shock of this story, and no one can explain it to this day. I mean, the fact that they were able to save a huge chunk is pretty telling. Next, we have the underwater Stonehenge that they found in the Michigan Triangle. Did you know that not just England, but America has a Stonehenge as well? The thing is, America's is underwater and it's incredibly spooky. So they found this underwater Stonehenge in the shallow parts of Lake Michigan. There is also a boulder that features an image of a mastodon, which is a species that was extinct 10,000 years ago. Now, the exact location of this Stonehenge in Lake Michigan has not been revealed to the public. Scientists don't really want people to know yet until they've done more research on it. Scientists still don't even know if this structure was man-made or if it just naturally occurred. Was it put there by aliens? It's just creepy to know that somewhere in the Lake Michigan area, there's an underwater Stonehenge. Next, we have a story about a single ship collision. Now, it's a known fact that any type of collision that you go through, there's two factors involved. There's two things that collide together, obviously. However, that's not the case in the Michigan Triangle. At least, that's what the Rosabelle incident revealed. In 1921, a ship named Rosabella with 11 members on board vanished in the Michigan Triangle. And unlike the other incidents that I spoke about, the remains of the ship actually were found floating in this Michigan lake. However, a lot of people were extremely confused because the way the ship was broken and found in the water, it was 100% from a huge collision. And an even more chilling fact is that there were no other ship accidents recorded at a similar time, and no other remains of any other ship or structure were found. So what did it crash into? Next, we have the strange disappearance of Captain George R. Donner. Another unexplained mystery about the Michigan Triangle is the disappearance of Captain George Donner, who was guiding the ship named O.M. McFarland. In 1937, the ship was on the way to Port Washington when the captain walked into his cabin and told the rest of the crew to wake him up when they arrived. The crew followed the instruction and knocked on the captain's cabin, but received no response. And what was even more strange was that the cabin door was locked, so they had to literally break in to see if he was okay. When they got into his cabin, they realized the captain had vanished. The frightened crew revealed that the ship was in the Michigan Triangle when the chilling incident occurred, and he was never found. No trace of him. Next, we have the lost flight 2501. A deadly disaster again took place in the Michigan Triangle in 1950, but this time, instead of it being a boat, it was an aircraft. The Northwest Orient Air Flight's Flight 2501 with with 55 passengers and 3 crew members was on its way from New York to Minneapolis when the fatal event occurred. Just before the flight vanished from the radar, the captain had requested to descend to the cruising altitude to 2,500 due to extreme and unexpected turbulence. This permission could not be granted, so the flight continued to cruise at 3,500 feet, right over Lake Michigan. But this flight never reached its destination, and the plane's wreckage was never ever found. The reason for the crash remains a mystery, and the only remains found were body fragments and light debris. But the actual plane has never been found, which is mind-blowing. Planes are huge. And lastly, we have some unexplained, strange experiences. Not only the disappearances, but strange appearances too have made the Michigan Triangle one of the most mysterious places in the world. In 1919, people have observed unusual and bright lights in the sky above the Michigan Triangle. They reveal that they have witnessed 2 large balls of fire fall into Lake Michigan, and the explosion was so powerful that it shook the earth. People wondered if it was a fallen meteor. Other people say it was something to do with a UFO or something paranormal. This area just really freaks people out, and they have been scared of the Michigan Triangle for hundreds of years. And those are all the occurrences I'm going to be talking about today. There are so many more, so please comment down below if I missed anything of significance. But there are a lot of triangles around the world that I could talk about. So if you want me to do a video on more things like this, definitely give this video a thumbs up and let me know. So the first thing that was found frozen in ice was a very deadly virus. For hundreds of years, people have thought that there are terrible things hiding deep underground or frozen in the Arctic, like illnesses that have been eradicated that somehow find their way back to the surface after being hidden. You guys probably remember from history, the plague was a huge deadly illness that killed a lot of people around the world. And that illness has currently been put to rest, but what if some of those illnesses were kept under the ice and are now melting and being open to the air again? Well, not too long ago, scientists actually found a virus that was hidden in the ice that is about 30,000 years old. There is no known cure for this virus because it is so old, and it has been nicknamed the Pathos virus, and it is said to be the largest virus on Earth. And this discovery has made scientists say that there could be anything hiding in the ice like illnesses. And especially with global warming making everything melt, all of these things could be exposed to us very, very soon. So guys, let's save the planet as much as we can. The next thing people found was a giant frozen disturbing crater. A crater under Siberia that they named the end of the world is one of the world's largest craters. Oil workers who were flying over Siberia were the first ones to notice the giant hole in the ground and immediately reported their findings. Now, scientists were unable to pinpoint how deep this crater actually is, and nobody really wants to go way down there to find out, but it reaches about 200 feet across. Now, there are different theories as to what caused this massive hole in the ground. Some people think it could have been caused by a giant explosion, and other people think it could have been caused by a giant meteorite. Either way, this giant hole in the earth is definitely disturbing and eerie. The next thing people found is alien markings in the ice. 2 friends that were walking along a frozen lake made a strange discovery when they came across this strange formation in the middle of the lake. This strange mass was actually found in Utah, and it just looks like these small patterned holes poking through the ice, but it has such a strange formation that people think it just couldn't be natural. People say it was something aliens left when they visited Earth, and other people speculate it to be a landing spot of a UFO. Some people say it's eggs from some sort of other world, because when you touch this formation, apparently it's slimy and just super weird to touch. They have been doing research on this for so long and they cannot figure out what it is, so this has just remained a mystery and it's creepy. I mean, I do believe in aliens, I believe in other life out there, so Who knows, it could be real. The next thing they found frozen in ice was plane crash wreckage. Recently, a wreckage site was discovered in Alaska, and apparently this wreckage was from a plane crash that happened back in the 1950s, so this is super, super old, and only half of the plane was actually found, and the other half apparently was frozen in ice along with some of the bodies that were never found. So they found all of this stuck in a glacier, which is crazy. So it was all the plane wreckage and a few skeletons, which is absolutely heartbreaking and horrible to find. The next thing they found frozen in ice was a bunch of old photographs. They say it's because about 100 years ago, a ship ended up crashing. And because of the crash, all of these old photographs were just sort of thrown into the water and stuck into ice. These photographs were actually inside a lockbox that was in a block of ice. And when they opened it, they found all of these black and white images from the crew members that were actually on this ship. Now, when they looked through these pictures, it was actually very sad because it showed all of the crew members, and you can see their worried faces because they knew they were lost. They knew they probably weren't gonna make it. So it's kind of like these photos showed their very last moments. The boat basically crashed into ice, and a lot of the crew members actually had to walk the rest of the way that they were going. Some didn't make it, but some actually did end up surviving. But it must have been super eerie to find those pictures. The next thing that was found was called a frozen volcano. Now, there are so many things that cold weather can freeze. You would absolutely be surprised at the things that could freeze. But normally you wouldn't think like, oh, a volcano can freeze because of how hot it actually is. Now, technically these aren't active volcanoes that froze, but instead they are frozen formations in the ground. The immense change in temperature when the ground freezes over, then melts, can be enough to form the ground into strange formations. The fairly flat land is interrupted by the perturbing hills that are produced from these icy conditions. It's one of nature's strangest phenomenons. And you guys know how much I love phenomenons. I find this stuff absolutely fascinating, and I think it would be so cool to actually be there to see these in person. And the last thing they found in frozen waters were sea pigs. They sound so cute, and they actually look kind of cute. Sea pigs are actually as weird as they sound. They're from the South Pole, and they're not actually pigs, although they dwell in the sea, and realistically, they don't resemble pigs at all. They likely get their name from their bulbous shape and pink coloring, but they're actually a species of sea cucumber. So basically all they do is they crawl along the ocean floor, but they live in very, very cold conditions, and some of them have been found in ice because it does get so cold. They suck up organic nutrients with their tube-like appendages and often stay to themselves, eating things that have fallen from the ocean surface and settled to the bottom. I have never heard or seen these things until I did research for this video. They are so cute, and I feel like it's a good way to end this video because a lot of the stuff we talked about is so dark and creepy, so it's good to just end with sea pigs. Anyway, so guys, those are all the ones we're going to be talking about today. If you can think of any other creepy things that were found frozen in ice, definitely comment them down below. Alright guys, so without further ado, let's talk about the lost city of Atlantis. The world is full of mysteries, and nothing is more mysterious to us than the ocean, which is home to many myths and legends. While scientists have successfully explained many of these mysteries, quite a few remain unexplained. Lost cities, hidden treasures, and mystic ships are part of the alluring marine world. Of all of these, the lost city of Atlantis tops the list. The lost city of Atlantis was first mentioned by the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, and it's known as one of the oldest and greatest mysteries of the world. According to Plato, the utopian island kingdom existed some 9,000 years ago and mysteriously disappeared one day. And even after years of research, the exact truth about this city has not been found. And that's why there's so much folklore attached to it, because the mystery is just crazy to people. So let's talk about where they think Atlantis really is. This is like the biggest question that boggles people and scientists everywhere. It's suggested that the city is believed to have sunk into the sea after an earthquake or tsunami. Plato added that the city under the sea should have been somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean. However, no technology has revealed any such city under there. While some theories suggest Atlantis is located in the Mediterranean off the coast of Spain, others argue that it could actually be underneath Antarctica. And the estimated size of Atlantis is insane. There's actually an American mystic that predicts Atlantis to be larger than Eurasia. So let's delve more into this mysterious legend. Legend says that the Atlantis city was built by Poseidon, the god of sea, of storms and earthquakes, when he fell in love with the mortal woman Cleito. He made his city on top of a hill on an isolated island in the sea to protect her and named it Atlantis. It was said that Atlantis was inhabited by people who were more beautiful and intelligent than the rest of the world. Before Atlantis sunk, it was built on land, it was surrounded by a ring of water, it had tunnels and vast canals, it had towers, it had ships that would go all around the island. According to mythological accounts, the city of Atlantis fell as the people became greedy and immoral, which angered the gods, who sent them a night of fire and earthquakes that led to the city being drowned. So let's talk about how aliens come to play in this whole legend. Stories also claim that the original inhabitants of the lost city of Atlantis are believed to be of extraterrestrial origin. The average lifespan of these people is believed to have been 800 years. The inhabitants of Atlantis city are believed to possess exceptional powers, such as the ability to control the weather and modify volcanic eruptions. So to end off this video, let's ask the question, is this place really real? While many still consider the lost city of Atlantis a conspiracy theory, many studies doing the rounds suggest that the fable is based on actual events. Ocean explorer Robert Ballard finds logic in the story as it has similarities with a massive volcanic eruption on the island of Santorini. He says that once there was a highly advanced society that lived there and then just disappeared suddenly. And that's exactly what happened with Atlantis. So could that have been the same thing? As the debate continued, few researchers claim that this utopian kingdom was a whole continent located off the Bahamas, and the Bermuda Triangle later swallowed it up. At the same time, another group suggests current Antarctica is the newer version of Atlantis. So there's so many arguments and different theories that people have. It's like 50-50. 50% of people believe it was real, it actually sunk, it's still actually out there, we just haven't found it yet, and the other people believe it's all just a legend, folktale. So comment down below what you believe. Do you think it's still out there sunken somewhere, or do you think it's all just a fable? Alright, so let's get into the world's weirdest discoveries. The first one is the Moa bird foot. In 1987, a team of archaeologists was carrying out a routine expedition in a cave on Mount Owen in New Zealand when they stumbled across a scary object, a gigantic dinosaur-like foot still intact with flesh and scaly skin. This foot was so well intact that scientists first thought it was an animal that just recently passed away. And it shocked people because it looked like a fresh dinosaur foot, and people were like, wait, I thought those were extinct. Are they still around, like hiding or something? Further examination revealed it actually was the 3,300-year-old mummified remains of the large prehistoric Moa bird. So in the end, it wasn't actually a huge scary creature or a dinosaur, it was a Moa bird. But those things are still quite large, as you can tell by the foot. The next discovery is called the Ice Finger of Doom. The Ice Finger of Doom! Looking like a tornado, the Ice Finger of Doom is actually an underwater icicle traveling down to the ocean's surface. But when it touches the bottom, it freezes everything that it touches. So it's literally like an underwater tornado that is made from ice and is super deadly to any fish or wildlife that it touches because you will instantly freeze. I mean, an underwater moving icicle is terrifying. I'm already afraid of the ocean as it is. We don't need a scary cold finger going after us, okay? Oh, I just got a package. The post guy's here. I love getting packages. And now he sees me filming. Awkward. Ty, there's a package coming. Do you have pants on? This next discovery is so bizarre and creepy. Hundreds and hundreds of shoes were randomly found, washed ashore one day, and nobody knows where they came from and why there are so many. Some people do get lost on the open seas, but this looks to us like entire ships worth of shoes. I'm guessing it was probably a boat that just had a ton of boxes of shoes for like a store or something. It was being shipped over, and I guess the boat crashed or drowned, or I don't really know how to explain this, but it's crazy. This next one I'm gonna have trouble pronouncing, I just know. It's called the Lost City of Heraklion. So archaeologists had spent years and years trying to find this lost city. The city was supposedly underwater, and just reading this really reminds me of like Atlantis. Anybody else watch that movie as a kid? It was so good. Using advanced underwater screening technology, they finally found it. The ancient city was completely submerged 6.5 kilometers off the coast. Now in this underwater city, they found 64 ships, 700 anchors, gold coins, and statues that stood 16 feet tall. I mean, I feel like this whole discovery would be such a good movie. This next thing is bizarre too. 30,000 rubber ducks were found washed ashore one day. 25 years ago, thousands of ducks were lost at sea, and they've traveled all over the world to places like Hawaii, the UK, South Africa, and even the Arctic. It's so crazy how like these ducks can spend so long at sea and still group together and go to different areas totally intact. I mean, they all traveled so far, you gotta imagine what they've seen, what they've experienced. The next strange thing that has been washed ashore that really stunned and confused people were giant Lego people. Giant Lego men have washed up on various beaches around the world in places such as Florida, Brighton, Japan, and the Netherlands. Apparently these were made by an artist named Ego Leonard, and I think his intention was to put them into the water and hope that they would wash ashore to like shock people. I know a lot of artists are really into the whole shock factor thing, but imagine accidentally just stumbling across these while you're walking down the beach. This next one for me so far is the scariest one. They're called the Silent People, and already their name is just not okay with me. It's one of the spookiest sightings ever made on Google Maps. So literally someone just saw this on Google Maps and reported it because it was so confusing and random. A field of scarecrows have been spotted in a field in Finland, leaving observers baffled about why they are there. At first glance though, it looks like a bunch of real people just standing all together in a group looking off into the distance. Like they look like hypnotized zombies or something. They are part of an art installation called the Silent People. So once people found out this was an intentional art project, they were less afraid. But like imagine walking through the forest or the field and just seeing these. And apparently this is like a common thing for people to do around the world. So there have been other instances where people have stumbled across the Silent People. And I'm just saying, as cool as it could be, I never want to see them. And you guys probably don't either. This next discovery is called the cartoon-eyed shark. Florida researchers uncovered this dogfish shark earlier this summer. It lives in the Gulf of Mexico and Atlantic Ocean. What intrigues people the most about this specific shark is the fact that its eyes look so cartoony. It almost doesn't even look real. They just look totally painted onto the shark. The next discovery was a giant eye floating through the ocean. This next discovery reminds me of that scene from The Shining. You guys will know the scene when I show you this picture. They're called blood falls. When it was discovered in 1911 by an Australian geologist, the explanation he came up with was that the microscopic red algae gave the water its coloring. Just imagine walking through the Arctic and just seeing blood falls. Then in 2003, when they did more research on it, they found out it was actually caused by oxidized iron. And to get to this valley where Blood Falls is, you have to take a helicopter. You can't get there on foot, so not a lot of people have seen these in real life, but it's pretty phenomenal. This next thing freaked me out so much. It's not really a discovery as much as it is a realization. People found out that if you flip a picture of a great white shark upside down, it looks like a scary monster goblin. It looks like a demon thing with teeth smiling at you. It looks so scary, and now I'm never gonna look at great white sharks the same. I mean, I'm so glad they don't swim around like that. Could you imagine? And the last discovery I'm going to talk about are UFO clouds. It is what it sounds like. It's clouds that literally look like alien UFOs. Now, this might seem a bit far-fetched, but there are alien hunters out there. I had no idea that alien hunter was an actual career. That's so cool. Alien hunters claim that some UFOs disguise themselves as clouds in order to be able to come close. So some people think that these clouds aren't actually clouds, they're actually the UFOs with tons of like fog and cloud matter around them to not be spotted. Anyways though guys, those are all of the discoveries I'm going to be talking about today. Did it blow your mind? Because it blew mine.
In an enchanted realm, an oddity stirs, beckoning the curious. Meet Jessii, once ensnared, now awakened, waiting to be yours.